Of late, the Indian news media have been abuzz with names like Tillu Tajpuria, Anil Turjana, Vikas Dubey, Sundar Bhati, Atiq Ahmed, Mukhtar Ansari, Brij Bhushan Sharan Singh, and Anand Mohan Singh. Some of them have been accused or convicted, many killed, while one of them walks out of the jail because of his connections with high places. The media uses terms like Bahubali, Mafia Don, or gangster indiscriminately to describe them. In common parlance, all of them are gundas. The gunda is, in fact, an entry level freelancer thug. He may or may not rise to become a gangster before reaching the status of a mafia don. He may not even survive as a gunda. A gangster is the next level of the hierarchy. There is a hierarchy of criminals, So, gangster is at a higher level than a gunda. He is part of a group of criminals who plan and execute crimes like looting banks, indulging in blackmail, contract killing, and kidnapping. Both the gunda and the gangster act as on-the-ground carriers of drugs and contraband and work as hired guns of a mafia don. The wannabe mafia don starts off as a local bully, turns to small-time crimes, and then becomes an intern of sorts with the more experienced and powerful local gangsters. This trajectory is epitomized by India's first mafia don, Karim Lala, a migrant from Afghanistan. He worked in the Bombay Dogs for a while. Later, he joined a gang of Pathans who worked as recovery agents for Marwadi and Gujarati moneylenders, landlords, and business owners. Soon he became the Pathan gang's leader. His gang became notorious for illegal takeover of private properties, running gambling and illicit liquor dens, kidnapping, protection rackets, and contract killing. Karim Lala became the first don of India's nascent mafia world. Varatharajan Mudaliar and Haji Mastan followed Karim Lala. They also started their underworld careers as petty thieves in the docks. India's present number one mafia don, Dawood Ibrahim, started committing fraud, theft, and robbery while still in his teens. Later on, he founded the infamous D Company in partnership with his brother, whose name was Shabir Ibrahim Kaskar. Today, he is one of the most wanted criminals in the world. But how did the term mafia don gain currency throughout the world? There is an interesting history behind it all. The mafia story may have its roots in Italy, but its global dimensions were acquired with the Italian migration to United States of America long back. The Sicilian Mafia is the most infamous criminal group, immortalized in many movies and other media, including novels. Novels you must have heard about Mario Puzo's Godfather. The mafia began in Sicily in the early 19th century, but they extended their operations to American soil soon afterwards. During the late 19th century and early 20th century, waves of Italians flocked to America in search of a better quality of life. Most of them, these Italian migrants, were uneducated, but they were generally law-abiding. However, there were criminal elements among them who turned New York into America's crime capital. Sicily was ruled by a long line of foreign invaders. The occupying forces were often hostile to the locals. So the Sicilian people unified themselves to defend their home and hearth and their women and children. They formed groups that morphed into clans, which had their own justice and retribution systems. This became a part of the Sicilian crime world's DNA, which was carried to the United States later on. When prohibition was enforced in the United States during the 1920s, bootlegging became a lucrative business. Various criminal gangs joined the booming criminal activity, which was dominated by gangs of Americans belonging to Italian ethnic groups. Soon, smuggling, money laundering, bribery, and blackmail became part of the sophisticated and powerful networks of the Sicilian crime. As we all know, Sicily is in Italy and is the birthplace of some of the most vicious mafia families in the world. When Benito Mussolini's regime cracked down on these gangs, they migrated to the United States, where they found the environment better suited to their type of activities. 20 Italian mafia families from across the United States formed a central organization called the Commission. New York had 5 main mafia families, while other cities had only one each. The Commission's role was to set policies and mediate. Typically, each American mafia crime family was organized around a hierarchy headed by a boss. He ruled with unquestioned authority and received a cut of every money-making operation taken on by any member of his family. Second in command was the underboss, and below him were the capos or capos, also called captains, who each controlled a crew of soldiers. These soldiers might be about a dozen or so, or maybe a bit less. Each family also had an advisor, the mafia family. He could be a solicitor or a lawyer or whatever, the person who would look after the cases once they are formed, or who would guide the mafia chief how to evade law. One had to be an Italian to be part of the mafia family. Becoming a member of the mafia was a lifetime commitment, and each mafiosi swore to obey omerta, and this omerta was the all-important code of loyalty and silence. The penalty of breaking omerta was, or violating omerta was, death, generally a very painful death. Then there were lesser gangsters in America, mafia gangsters. You could call them mafia, or you can simply call them gangsters, but they were very much a menace to the American society, and they still are. Quite a few of them still exist, as do the mafia. The first one among these was Crips and Bloods. These are two groups, not one. Crips is one group and Bloods is another. Founded in the late 1960s, the Crips are a group of Afro-American youth. They have over 800 fractions nationwide and around 35,000 active members. Just after the Crips was formed, the Bloods came into existence. The feud between these two criminal groups lasted for decades, and it is still going strong. Another gang of criminals was called, and is still called, the Irish Mob. It initially began in 1800 as a group of street gangs doing protection and bootlegging in port cities like Manhattan, Boston, and Montreal. The Irish Mob eventually went into politics and the police department. This infiltration opened the door into the high society for them. Thanks to the political power, many of its members became celebrities. Hells Angels is another gang of criminals formed after World War II. Is connected to various mobs worldwide. Many of their members had been arrested for various criminal activities. Police organizations have listed the Hells Angels as one of the 4 biggest motorbike gangs in the world, not just in America. As 20th century dawned, the mafia had become a dominant force in the American society. To some extent politics, maybe not directly but indirectly, but they were very much there. When prohibition was abolished in 1933, the mafia spread tentacles to other forms of crime, which included gambling, loan sharking, and prostitution. For acquiring societal acceptability, the mafia families often ran legitimate businesses like construction, restaurants, trucking or transportation, and garments. Of course, they found kickbacks, shakedowns, and labor unions extremely lucrative forms of business. That these mafia families not only survived but actually flourished speaks volumes against the effectiveness of governance in America during those times. The levels of corruption were such that the mafia could bribe and browbeat public officials, business leaders, along with witnesses and juries in court cases. In 1970, the United States woke up to the necessity of curbing the mafia. The Congress passed the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations or RICO Act. It empowered prosecutors to go after mafia families and their sources of revenue, both legal and illegal. During the 1980s and 1990s, the RICO laws were used to convict many high-level mobsters. Some mafiosi, faced with long prison sentences, broke the once sacred code of omerta and testified against their fellow mobsters for a place in the federal witness protection program. As a result, mafia membership declined. By the start of the 21st century, the American mafia was a shadow of its former self. However, the mafia remains active in some of its traditional ventures as loan sharking and illegal gambling. Their involvement in labor unions and legitimate industries such as construction haven't been eliminated. So the mafia, we have heard so far about the rise and spread of mafia in America. But similar mafia families, gangs and gangsters exist in other parts of the world too. We'll make a reference to them. The first of these is the triad. The triad dates back to the 18th century. At first, they were a group of secret societies driven underground by British colonists. Triad is in China. It is a Chinese criminal group. They have so far survived the communist Chinese government's pressures and have a sophisticated network of drug dealing, prostitution, and forging money. They are experts in counterfeit money. Triad members have a rigorous code of conduct. These organizations have a strong international presence and are one of the most feared criminal organizations. In Russia, there is the Russian mob or the Russian mafia. It is one of the most well-organized criminal groups. It dates back to the 18th century of the Tsarist Russia. Unlike the triad, the Russian mafia developed even further under the communist rule, infiltrating government institutions. Many Russian mafia factions have successfully meddled in politics, business, and black markets worldwide, not just in Russia. The operatives in the Russian mob, also known as thieves-in-law. You must have heard of father-in-law, mother-in-law, but these are thieves-in-law. And they are recognized by their cryptic tattoos and enforcing way of doing business. They are quite rough people. The Kali cartel is another group of gangsters, and it is one of the wealthiest drug cartels in the history of crime. This cartel originated in the late 1970s when cocaine smuggling was flourishing. Its operators are primarily out of Colombia, the South Latin American country. But they had a long international reach. Kali wasn't solely organized around a central figure. So that was an advantage. If the central figure dies, the group disintegrates. But here there was no central figure. So it was very hard to hit such a group and destroy it. Its independent structure caused its success in the drug market. However, it is now extinct. But this criminal group left a massive impact on the drug trade. Then there are the Mexican cartels, which are highly organized and well armed. Several Mexican cartels found themselves involved in bloody territorial disputes. The disputes escalated into gang wars, taking a heavy toll on human lives. Still, they remain a powerful paramilitary criminal force that has huge stakes in Mexico's politics and public works. Their discipline and brutality make them a force to be reckoned with in Mexico and parts of North and South America too. Japan's Yakuza has its origins dating back to the 17th century, which makes it one of the oldest criminal organizations. The Yakuza has one of the strictest honor codes with draconian punishment for any violation or even a mistake. The power of the Yakuza is divided between four dominant clans. Reach of the Yakuza is enormous and they are so integrated into the society that the Japanese economy would probably collapse without them. You can well understand the power, the reach, and the infiltration of this gang of criminals. We have talked about the rest of the world. What about India? India has had its share of mafia dons. It is a vast country with mind-boggling ethnic, economic, and social and geographical diversities. This poses a strong challenge to those in charge of governance, while providing opportunities for crime to proliferate. Today, there are many crime syndicates operating in different states of India, the deadliest being the D Company. Run by Dawood Ibrahim, the D Company is a massive and violent syndicate with its fingers in large-scale fraud, extortion, and even terrorist activities. The D Company spread its tentacles worldwide. Smuggling and gun running is its major business. It reputedly supplied weapons to Osama bin Laden's Al-Qaeda. So America has found out in the late 20th and early 21st century how to tackle the mafia and take them down. What about India? How India is dealing with the proliferating gangs of criminals as well as mafia families. There are several laws legislated by the central government and individual states to fight crimes like human and drug trafficking, land grab, blackmail, etc. However, their execution is poor and selective. There are well-known cases of police encounters that can be described as borderline cases of extrajudicial killings. I said selective because there are plenty of criminals, powerful criminals. You can call them mafia dons if you wish, or high-level gangsters who have political protection. And this is not a recent phenomenon. This has been there for decades now, especially in UP, Bihar, and in parts of Madhya Pradesh, etc., etc., etc. There have been, and even in Punjab, there are gangsters who have the political protection. There is a need for a streamlined justice dispensation system that will fight the crime without vitiating the average person's faith in the rule of law. This I'm talking about India. In India, whatever the laws are, they are not implemented the way they should be. And often there are loopholes which are made use of for people in power to protect their pet criminals. Yes, there are pet criminals. And in fact, India is one of those few democracies where the gangsters, the mafia, the criminals, people, the history sheeters, they can stand for, they have stood for elections and they have been elected too. And this is a very sad story. The sooner this story ends, the better for India and its future. Thank you for listening to me. I'll come back with another video.